At around $30, the MiBand 5 represents incredible value for money with features that you would otherwise be paying 5, 10, 15 times as much for in other devices. If you want continuous heart rate monitoring, activity tracking, sleep tracking, notifications and more, then I can highly recommend the MiBand 5. Join me, James Bruce, with MakeUseOf.com reviews as I take a closer look at the MiBand 5 and see if it's the right fitness tracker for you. Weighing as little as 12 grams or 0.4 ounces, the MiBand 5's standout feature is a large, touch-sensitive OLED display and a continuous heart rate PPG sensor. At a most basic level, it's a step tracker. That's hardly an incredible feature to shout home about, so let's move on quickly. You then have a heart rate sensor, which you can enable in intervals anywhere down to the granularity of every minute, which is effectively a continuous heart rate sensor. Now, why exactly you'd want to do this, I'll get to in a moment. But for testing purposes, I set it on 10 minutes and I managed to get about 2.5 weeks of usage out of that, including notifications being turned on. And that's a pretty good level of detail. Now, even though you can take manual measurements at any point if you want, I didn't test it with the heart rate sensor off entirely because honestly, if you're going to turn that off when it's a standout feature of the device, there's really not much point in buying this. You may as well just buy a $5 step tracker. But the real benefits of the MiBand 5 happen when you turn on continuous heart rate monitoring, or effectively every minute. And this enables some certain key features that I'll talk about in a moment. But briefly, I just want to say that when it's enabled to every minute readings, that drops about 10% of the battery life every day. So you can expect anywhere from a week to around 10 days of battery life in normal continuous heart rate monitoring usage. So the main reason to turn on continuous heart rate tracking is so that it can automatically track whatever you're doing throughout the day and anytime your heart rate is elevated. And it'll use that to input data into calculating what it calls PAI, which stands for Personal Activity Intelligence. Now, this is a relatively new measurement. I think it's new to me at least. I haven't heard of this before. But essentially, it's a weekly score, and any sort of activity that you do will contribute some points towards this score, whether that's light intensity, medium or high intensity. It will all generate a different amount of points towards your overall goal. Now, you can start this out at about 100 points per week. I believe it says that getting 100 a week will reduce your chance of having some kind of heart problem later in life by about 25%. So it's a good goal for us all to aim for. Now, you get more points, of course, for high intensity things like running, but pretty much anything that you do that elevates your heart rate in some way is going to contribute towards your score. And this is what I really like about it. Believe it or not, I do actually do some exercise, but it's usually in VR on the Quest. So I use an app called FitXR, which is a boxing app. And I found that 20 minutes of this contributed about 15 points towards my PAI total. So if I did that once a day for the whole week, then that would hit my 100 points. So I have to say, I really like this approach to activity tracking. I can't stand having to manually put in some exercise like running or walking and pressing start and stop when you finish. That's just too much bother as far as I'm concerned. The great point about PAR and continuous heart rate monitoring is that it's always on and continuous and automatic. So you don't have to add in any data for that. It's just going to keep an eye on your heart rate and use that to calculate its score. Now, this 100 a week score is very similar to the idea of getting 10,000 steps a day. So if you're already achieving that 10,000 steps a day, then I think the 100 PAI score or 150 is a good next step goal to get to. And remember, your walks are still going to contribute to this, so you don't have to forget about the 10,000 steps a day. You can still do that as well, but also take a look at your PAI and ensure you're hitting a weekly goal. The other great point about it is that it's not a daily goal. So if you can't get out for a walk one day, that doesn't matter, as long as you make it up some other time, and across the week span, you can hit that 100. Ultimately, though, it's a simple, easy system that anyone can pick up and be motivated by in order to get more exercise. And that's really what we all need. So the only downside to PAI is, as I mentioned, it requires continuous heart rate monitoring, which will use the battery at the highest possible rate, basically. Even so, 10 days of battery life, roughly, I was finding with 1 minute intervals on the heart rate sensor. I think that's pretty good. Now for sleep tracking, the motion sensor plus the combination of continuous heart rate monitoring should give you pretty reliable sleep data. I should preface this by saying that I don't have another sleep tracking method or device that I can refer to or compare. However, I do of course have my own experience to refer to. And what I found was that overall the general broad picture of my sleep patterns were being accurately represented by what the MiBand told me. So if the dog had woken up in the middle of the night wanting to go out, or if I've got up to have a pee, it tracked that reliably. It was showing up on the data. So I think broadly you can trust the sleep data. That said, tracking REM sleep, rapid eye movement, dreaming while you're sleeping is a very difficult thing to do without a headband that has EEG sensors. So the data we're getting for that is probably algorithmically derived from certain known patterns. So I wouldn't trust that too much. But in terms of broadly a general picture of your sleep, how much sleep you're getting when you've gone to bed, when you're getting up, etc., I think it's pretty reliable. Lastly, the MiBand 5 claims to track stress, and at any point you can have a stress measurement if you want. Now again, this is derived from the heart rate data. In fact, it uses the variability of your heart rate in order to figure out your stress levels. I assume that means that when your heart rate varies a lot at any one point, you are more stressed. Now, my colleague and resident wearables expert, Canon, tells me that this is not a reliable way to track stress. It's not going to look at physical stress. If anything, it might tell you emotional stress, but even then it's not going to be that reliable. And that makes sense given that it's a algorithmically derived number from the heart rate sensor. Still, again, I did find this gave me a broadly accurate picture. Whenever I've been stressed over the past month of having this, I've looked down at the MiBand and saw, oh yes, it does in fact say I'm stressed. So it pretty much matched up with what I was feeling. Having said that, I don't really see the point of the data. I mean, I'm emotionally aware enough to know when I'm stressed, right? Unlike, say, sleep data or heart rate, which is actionable and useful to know, I don't think it's that useful to know stress levels. I suppose if you were unsure of what's making you stressed, you could look back through the timeline and say, well, what was I doing at that point? Oh yes, I was in a meeting with my boss. But again, I would have thought that was pretty obvious for most of us. Now, one of the other great things about the MiBand and the MiFit app is that your data isn't held solely within that app, unlike, say, the Fitbit, which tends to silo everything away and you need third-party apps just to sync it up with Apple Health. With this, for Apple Health or Google Health, whatever their equivalent is, I should say I only tested with Apple, but all of this data is automatically synced into your iCloud Apple Health account. So while I do prefer to just look at the data it's gathered through the MiFit app just because I'm more familiar with it and I find it easier to use, it is great having it syncing up with Apple Health in case I ever decide to move away from the MiBand to, say, an Apple Watch. It's good to still be able to have all of that data in there, to have the archive if I ever need to show my doctor or if I just want to compare how things go over time. So kudos to Xiaomi for not locking that away. Other features worth mentioning are notifications that you can get from your phone. So anything that would pop up as a notification on your phone can be sent to your MiFit band. And it also has lift to wake, which preserves your battery life and in my experience works pretty reliably. The notification feature is definitely something I appreciate because it means that I don't have to pull out my phone whenever there's a buzz just to see, is this an important Slack message from work or is it just some nonsense from the BBC about the latest royal baby? Being able to do that on my wrist at a glance is a great time-saving feature. Again, with the lift to wake feature, you don't need to worry too much about battery life. And I should say the battery lives that I've quoted, the 10 days with continuous heart rate monitoring every minute, includes lots of notifications being sent to my MiBand. So if you don't get so many notifications, then you're probably going to get an even better battery life. Then, of course, it also does manual activity tracking, things like running, so you can start and stop that. However, it doesn't have GPS. So if you're really looking for things that will track your running exercises in more detail, you're probably going to be looking elsewhere at devices that cost 5-10 times as much. So should you buy the MiBand 5 activity tracker and wearable device? I can wholeheartedly recommend it for most people. For something that has continuous 1-minute heart rate tracking, fairly good sleep tracking, notifications, and all of that data exported and shared with Apple Health, I can thoroughly recommend this for most people. It represents fantastic value for money. I would especially recommend it to people who feel that the 10,000 steps a day goal is either unachievable because they're locked down in their bedroom and literally can't leave their house at the moment, or even for people who are already hitting that 10,000 steps a day goal and would just like to track their activity in a little bit more detail than a simple step counter. The PAI, or Personal Activity Intelligence Score, seems like a really good midway point between detailed activity tracking and far too simplistic step tracking. With other fitness trackers, things you might be doing around the home, for instance, just won't be tracked because they're not on that designated list of approved healthy activities, even though they do actually get your heart rate up. The beauty of the PAI is that it tracks everything you do that elevates your heart rate, and I do mean everything. That kind of granular heart rate data tracking just can't be beaten for around $30, and that's even ignoring all the other features like notification support, which are genuinely quite useful. If you do need even more data, things like GPS, mapping, elevation, that sort of thing, then you are really going to be paying 5, 10, 15 times as much for something like the Apple Watch or more advanced trackers. But for most of us, the MiBand 5 is great. All right, thank you for watching. I hope this review has proved helpful for you in some way. If it has, do hit the like button and consider subscribing to this channel for more weekly gadget reviews, giveaways, daily tech news shows, and more from all of us over at makeuseof.com. Until next time, stay safe.